Hey time travelers! A few days ago, I took apart my RTX 3090 for the second time to try to improve the thermals.
Bruh moments.
Yeah, bruh.
Bruh.
I was working with EVGA support and they sent me thermal pads, and after I put those on, my thermals got worse. So this time around, I replaced the thermal putty. That's right, not pads, not paste, putty. And this is that story. Story. This is my look of disapproval. Originally, I was getting bad temps when I was trying to mine Ethereum, and I looked all over the YouTubes of people tearing apart the card, and nobody said how thick the thermal pads were, so I could replace them, you know, because you have to know how thick they are before you go buy them. So I asked EVGA support what the thicknesses were, and they wouldn't tell me the thicknesses, but instead offered to send me some pads. Spoilers, they're 2 millimeters. On this particular model, it's the EVGA RTX 3090 XC3, and there's no other pads on it, just a whole bunch of 2 millimeter ones. For more info, and you could see the actual process for the teardown, click the card up in the corner so you can see my previous video. Some awkward obstacles that I encountered, just FYI, without you having watched that video, was that the RGB and fan connectors were really fragile and the little clips broke, but they still fit back together afterwards, so that's great. The back plate is a really thin aluminum, so you gotta make sure you have all the screws off before you take it off or you'll bend it. All right, aluminum, go back to being straight. That wasn't hard at all. And there are 2 screws that have nuts that hold them down. Yes, nuts. Yeah. Sometimes you feel like a nut. Sometimes you don't. Isn't that nuts? Are you hearing what I'm saying over here so you can heckle me?
Yeah.
I guess it wasn't funny. But like I said earlier, after doing that, my temps got worse, and I thought if I posted something on Reddit and asked for help, I would get help. Most people were not helpful, were complete jerks. I was asking people on Reddit, what do you think the problem is? My temps got worse after I changed the thermal pads, and they're like, your thermal pads suck. I'm like, they're the thermal pads EVGA sent me. They're like, EVGA sucks. Why didn't you just buy other thermal pads? And I said, because nobody on YouTube freaking measured their thermal pads when they did the walkthrough for how to change the thermal pads. And I don't know which ones to buy. And I asked EVGA, and EVGA is like, we're not going to tell you how thick they are. We're just going to send you some.
But yeah, you wonder why people don't get into new hobbies when the people that they're talking to are being complete butts.
Yeah, complete the butts with liquid shirt all over it. And making stinks.
Oh, I crapped my pants!
Yeah, like, why do people have to be a-holes on Reddit? Is that how they get their dopamine? By picking on people? But some people did help me out and give me some thermal putty options. Reddit user TKG times 5GK3GEZABL told me to get some TG-PP10 from Digikey and use it instead of thermal pads? I was like, what? Weird. But I was thinking, okay, the thermal putty that's on it was all dry and whatever, so that's probably why my temps got worse, so I bought some of that. And the Nocturnal Dad told me to try K5 Pro Viscous Thermal Paste. I did buy the K5 Pro after buying the stuff from Digikey, which turns out was out of stock, and for some reason the website didn't tell me it was out of stock and back ordered until after I paid for it. Yeah, blink. But I wanted to try something else before doing the thermal putty, so I tried 1mm gelid thermal pads. And the reason I tried 1mm was because when I had it taken apart, I measured what I thought looked like the thickness of the thermal putty, and it looked like it was about 1mm. And I thought it would work because most GPUs have thermal pads there, not thermal putty. And it's a spot where you put the, sorry, I'm reading my script, inductors, MOSFETs, whatever. You guys look at the picture and correct me in the comments. I tested it and I got worse thermals. Do you see that number right there? 122.4 mega hashes. Let's see what happens when it warms up, right? Now, look, it's already back down to 80. And if I go in here and open up hardware info 64, here's the 3090. The GPU is running at 73 Celsius, which is really good. You guys don't even know. When a miner sees 73 on their GPU, they're like, sweet. But look at the memory junction temperature. And Hank, I was talking to, yeah, it is thermal throttling. So I thought maybe if I got 1.5 thermal pads, 1.5 millimeter, like, nah, I got thermal putty, let's throw that on there because it's gonna be better thermal putty than it was on it because the Digikey's like the best according to the internets. But I would not put 2 millimeters on there because it would probably be too thick and you couldn't get the thing to mount back together. And then you wouldn't get enough mounting pressure on all of the other stuff. So then later on I did try the Digikey TG-PP10. But then I bought this and they're like, oh, it's out of stock, we'll send it to you eventually. And by the way, on Reddit, they said it wouldn't need more than 50 grams, so I bought the 50 gram one. And I think I only used about 20 grams of it, and that's just a guess. I scraped off the old thermal putty with the penknife. This is the most expensivest thing that I own, except maybe my Nova, even smashed. Probably costs more than this thing. Probably what I'm gonna spend all this Ethereum on is to fix my Nova. And I wiped it down. I thought I would use a chopstick to get the thermal putty out and apply it, but I ended up using a flathead screwdriver to get it out and apply it, and it worked fine. And you were watching that live stream, weren't you? Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
You were in the chat. You and a couple friends of mine. It was pretty fun. But I tested it again after that, and the thermals did improve, and the hash rate of the Ethereum mining went up to 88 versus the 80 that I was getting earlier that day. But it should be making 120, that's the problem. Later on, when it got warmer outside, like 55 degrees, and I turned on the AC and dropped the temperature from 80 Fahrenheit down to 77 in the house, I actually got up to 96 megahashes on that card. But it's supposed to make 120. Conclusion section of the video. So that's where I'm at now. And I'm going to keep working with EVGA support to see what we should do. They said in a previous message that they would RMA the card if the thermal pads they sent me didn't work. But this is getting awkward because another person responded to my follow-up question on my EVGA ticket when I told them that I replaced the thermal pads and the putty and it's still getting too hot because it's getting 100 degrees Celsius when I look at it with Hardware Info 64. Sorry, 110 degrees Celsius.
Oh.
Yeah. And
About to melt.
yeah, it's way too hot. And for some reason, that the follow-up guy said is under the impression that the thermal pads are for the core temps, not the memory temps. That is wrong. EVGA did come through because I sent them a screen cap of the previous message saying the thermal pads are from the memory and they shouldn't be running 110C. If you can't fix it, they will RMA the card, which means return merchandise authorization to replace it. So I'm pretty happy because within 2 days, they came back and told me that I can RMA the card. So that's the next step I'm going to take. So if it comes back and it's still running hot, I'm going to tinker with it some more because I got a lot of experience modifying that card, right? So on to the awkward on-screen because nobody can ever make a good I can't even talk right. Did I say on-screen?
Yes.
See? It's always awkward. Click over here to see the previous video where I took it apart and geek out or just be interested at weird geeky tech things that I do.
Click here to see whatever YouTube thinks is best.
Yeah, because algorithms. And you could subscribe to the channel right here.
Check out his music soundtrack channel here.
All right, thanks guys. Bye.